Ethiopians called them falashas, or outcasts. These Jews of Ethiopia considered themselves the fabled lost tribe of Israel. The Ethiopian Jews remained destitute well into the 20th century. By the 1980s, a 30-year civil war threatened their very existence. Something had to be done, or they risked total annihilation.
They survived because of their intense faith, because of the fact that their daily life revolved around the rituals that they performed and the prayers that they said, and also because they had a dream. And the dream was that one day they would go home to Jerusalem.
To the government of Israel and many Jewish groups in America, this was more than a dream. It was a crisis that demanded immediate action. Israel began secretly to plan an airlift that would fulfill Isaiah's prophecy and bring the Jews of Syene to Israel. By 1991, Ethiopian dictator Mengistu Mariam decided to use the Ethiopian Jews as bargaining chips, exchanging them for money and guns to fight the rebels. A deal was struck. Some would say a deal with the devil. The exodus, dubbed Operation Solomon, would take place on May 24th at Ethiopia's airport in Addis Ababa. Thousands of Ethiopian Jews flocked to the Israeli embassy, and on May 24th, the rebels were closing in on the city. The exodus became a race against time. To many, the word of God, as spoken through his prophet Isaiah, was hanging in the balance, and only the actions of men could make it come true. Just after 4 p.m., the first 747 arrived from Tel Aviv, a 3-hour flight. Hundreds of refugees quickly boarded the plane. They were going to the Promised Land.
There was some kind of mystical tranquility, which I cannot explain. People who never saw an airplane, who never were in an airport, they walked up the stairs, they took their seats, as if they would have been frequent travelers on American Airlines.
The airlift was a miracle of logistics. Each plane could only spend 15 minutes on the ground. There was no time even to turn off the engines. As one left, the next would touch down, leaving little room for error. All the while, the rebels marched closer. After nearly 36 hours and 40 round-trip flights, the Jews from Syene arrived safely in their promised land. Before the Ethiopian rebels could put an end to the operation, 34 airplanes carried 15,000 people to Tel Aviv. The improbable had come to pass, as if the prophet Isaiah had reached a long, thin finger through time to point the way for the lost tribe of Israel trapped in Ethiopia. Did Isaiah foresee the Ethiopian Jews' dangerous exodus 3,000 years before? Or did he describe the vague hope of an event fulfilled by the faithful? Skeptics argue the Ethiopian Jews and the Israelis made the exodus happen with little help from Isaiah. The only power the prophet wielded was the power of suggestion, not a divine connection.
The return of these Ethiopian Jews, I see as a reading by these people of themselves into a plot of history. I do not think that somebody 8 centuries before Christ is picturing the map of modern Africa, the map of the modern Middle East, and having it occur. So that very often, I think, we let our actions be guided by ancient prophecy. In a funny sense, you might say we help fulfill it.
Some biblical scholars argue that Isaiah meant his prophecy to be vague, so it would encompass all of the wandering Jewish people throughout the ages.
Isaiah was certainly talking about the future. I don't think anyone can say whether he was talking about the Ethiopian Jews, the Russian Jews, the Yemenites, the Syrians in any given word, but certainly he was saying that wherever our people are scattered, someday they will come home. And that is what happened with Operation Solomon.
In the real world, not the dream world of Elizabeth Prophet or Nostradamus or Edgar Cayce, this is how prophecies are made a reality. One could argue it's how any dream comes true, through risk, planning, and hard work. Prophets, regardless of what era of history in which they perform, tap into an ageless human need, symbolized by the threat of doomsday and the hope of a new beginning. In the shadow of doom, the commanding voice of the prophet provides a glimmer of light.
Prophecy is the story of the plan of the future. And if we look at it that way, it gives us a connection to our ancestors. It gives us a connection to each other and a plan on how to manage our lives. If otherwise we tend to just be afloat in the sea of chaos that we have to live in every day. And if we can somehow understand what is foretold in the future, it can give us hope. It can scare us into various emotions or a specific way of living, or it can guide us.
Skeptics like James Randi think scare is the operative word in prophecy. He believes the prophet perpetuates fear in order to take advantage of emotionally vulnerable people in a bid for followers.
If you said everything's going to be just dandy for the next 4 years, you're out of business. You've got to give them something to worry about and some way of getting around it, some advantage by being told that the system may fail, that some calamity is going to befall mankind in general, or you particularly, or your particular town, or your profession. It's very popular. Calamity is what makes prophecy.
Followers of the modern-day prophets like Elizabeth Prophet bristle at the accusation, arguing that naysayers are missing the point of the prophecy, which is not so much the threat of doomsday as the prescription for change.
Thoughtful people, when they take a look at what she's saying, understand that whether or not that they believe that she is a prophet, that she has a very important message. We're not interested in necessarily getting adherents. We're interested in providing information to people that will help them lead a better life, and she does that.
Skeptics view the propensity to rely on prophecy to control our lives as a tragic weakness, a quest for an easy answer that forsakes the innate power of human beings to think for themselves.
I think that we want magic in our lives. We want some sort of solution, some advantage. And if someone comes along with a funny turban on, or a ring in their ear or nose, or a horoscope on the wall behind them, we might tend to believe it. Belief should be based upon some sort of logical, rational evidence. I've looked into the prophecy business. It's very, very flawed. It simply doesn't work. If we believe that these things work, we will go after some sort of advantage. There is no amount of evidence and no quality of evidence that's ever going to convince the believer not to believe.
If the world ends in a fiery catastrophe or plods on fitfully, prophets will still claim to see the future, and skeptics will rail against what they deem preposterous predictions, sayings that are not only unexplained, but deliberately unexplainable. And yet, many leave room in our imaginations for a world in which Nostradamus really can predict the rise of Napoleon 3 centuries hence, where Edgar Cayce can predict a stock market crash, and Isaiah can make a single cryptic reference, and 3,000 years later, it can really come true.